listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jersey Guys Podcast. This is Mark Ballo and I'm here with my co-host Tom Coyne. Today we've got special guest Mark Mangold, who you may know from the band Touch in the 80s and also the band Drive She Said, amongst other things. And so we're going to talk with Mark today and hope you guys enjoy this one. So let's get right to it. So welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for doing this interview.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I guess I'll start with a little bit. Let's start with the band Touch. Now, I know that's a band that kind of morphed from the band American Tears. And tell us a little bit about how Touch formed and, you know, around that time period and you know, everything about Touch.
Well, again, it morphed out of the last American Tears record when we decided to add a guitarist to the band, Craig Brooks. And rather than doing another American Tears record, we thought we'd change the name. The sound was so different that we came up with the name Touch. We're doing just, I think, maybe even more accessible songs with guitars and tons of harmonies, as opposed to my crusade to have a keyboard trio and I'll do everything on keys, which I'm still on that crusade to an extent. With some of the things I do. But at that time, we then signed with Bruce Payne, who handles Rainbow, and Bruce got us a deal like within 2 weeks or something, signing with him. And then it was up to the races. Yeah, I mean, the clout that he brought to it, and I think people actually listened to us finally because we were involved with the right people. So we signed to Atco, and we proceeded to do that record.
Well, talk a little bit about, you mentioned a minute ago, Rainbow. You guys famously played the first Monsters of Rock show in Donington, England. And you guys actually were the first band on the bill that day. So technically you were the first band to ever play on the Donington stage at Monsters of Rock. How did that whole thing come about?
You know, I found that out about 10 years ago, that we were the first band to play Monsters of Rock. It kind of blew my mind. Well, Rainbow was touring, and Bruce put us on that tour, and we had a wonderful time touring around Europe with Rainbow, playing some amazing venues, and it culminated. Actually, we might have had a gig after Donington, or two after Donington as well, but it kind of led up to Donington. And yeah, we were the first band on stage. It was an amazing day, 60,000 people or something like that there. A bit rainy, everyone's walking around in boots, but it just was an iconic moment with, you know, other bands on the bill.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had Riot and Judas Priest and Saxon and, you know, of course, Rainbow, April Wine, some great bands on that bill.
They're still around. I mean, they're still, you know, freaking huge. They were kind of big then, but of course, they're, you know, icons at this point.
Yeah, sure.
So it's amazing how everybody stayed around. Yeah. Fortunately, with us, you know, it just became such mayhem as the day and setting up. But we fortunately had the mics set up properly for us. I mean, the bass drum mic was on the bass drum and guitar was on the guitar. I think, you know, as things started to get crazy, they just were throwing stuff on the stage, and the poor sound guy probably had to guess what the hell was where. But you know, we weren't as loud as we wanted to be. They generally kind of tuck, you know, the opening bands a bit. They don't want you to be as loud as, you know, the headliners. So I think we could have probably blasted a little more, but I think had a good show. We were very well rehearsed, I would say. So we just went up and did our thing.
Had you guys been playing prior to that, before going over? Had you toured in around America?
It's 7 or 8 gigs with Rainbow before that, so we were tight even when we started the tour, but we could probably do it in our sleep at that point.
Now, the big single, of course, from Touch is "Don't You Know What Love Is." That's a song, obviously, you wrote. Talk a little bit about that song and the success it had for you guys at that time.
Yeah, sometimes the last song you write for a record is the one, because you kind of look at the record and you kind of go, first you go, what is missing? And then you kind of find the essence of the record in a way. And then you try to write, or I do, as it turns out, not necessarily even intentionally, it just seems to happen. You kind of grab the essence of the record and you just put it in 3.5 minutes. And that's kind of what Don't You Know What Love Is came out of. I thought When the Spirit Movies was going to be the single, because it was, more melodic, maybe a little more poppy or commercial. But the record company came out, wanted to go with Don't You Know What Love Is, and they were certainly right. And that really slammed. I think it was number one in a couple, territories in the U.S. and certainly got some movement in Europe and did very well for us. So
yeah. Now that was you mentioned When the Spirit Moves You. That was also a single, though, right?
It was a single. Yeah,
okay.
I think that was a follow-up single. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that a second ago about kind of, when you talk about Don't You Know What Love Is, you said that it's kind of like the last thing. Was that the last song you wrote for the album?
Yeah.
It was. And it ended up being the first track on the album, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we knew we were having so much fun doing these vocals, piling of vocals and tapestries. And then guitar solos followed by kind of symphonic keyboard extravaganzas. And that became a bit of a signature of the band. And I really dig doing that.
Yeah.
I do that a lot now. Scathe, and then just go into, make a right turn into some, oh my God, symphonic direction. we did that a bunch of times on the new record, that came out last year.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Cool. I wanted to ask you one thing though, if I could. This is kind of a personal thing because my personal favorite song on the debut Touch is So High. What can you tell me about that song?
I love that song.
I mean, you talked about a keyboard extravaganza a second ago. Let's go there with that.
Yeah, it's weird, because I barely see myself as a singer. I've just worked with so many amazing singers. But I sang that song, so it's always gratifying to hear that, people dig it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's those synths, man, that synth line and those modulations. And yeah, it's a cool song.
So let's go to the, you mentioned a second ago that there is a new Touch album. Let's talk about that. 2021, Tomorrow Never Comes.
Right.
How did that all come about?
Well, we've been, playing with the idea. And finally I got the guys together a couple of years ago. I sent them a song and it was like, if you don't want to do a record, let's do a single. Let's show people we're still alive. And then I sent them Tomorrow Never Comes. And then I sent them 4 more songs and said, oh yeah, let's do all these. And then Craig wrote a couple, and then Doug wrote a couple, and I wrote a couple more. And by the end of it, the train just kept rolling, and we had 12, 13 songs or something.
Yeah.
And we just enjoyed the process so much again. It was like we never stopped in a way. And fortunately, everybody's still singing their ass off. Craig has not lost his voice like, so many other singers, partially because he hasn't been singing for 40 years. He's been doing other stuff. So he really has preserved his voice, and his range has probably increased from what it used to be.
Yeah.
And another thing that was cool was we kind of knew what we do. We really had a sense of what we were, more than like when we first did it. We were experimenting, I don't know, which is it's kind of a bad thing about what's happening now is everything's become so generic, and all these new bands or have heard all that stuff, and many times are just regurgitating it.
Yeah.
But in the early days when we were first coming up with all those bands, whether it be Purple or Foreigner or Touch, or Styx or Kansas, they're all looking for a new sound to define themselves, and that's what we were doing with the Touch stuff. We weren't looking around and saying, who can we copy? Or, this is going to be the 1,000th Whitesnake song that sounds like Is It Love?
Yeah.
Or whatever. So we were kind of threading the needle on Tomorrow Never Comes, because we knew that we had to somehow be in that world that we had created, but we didn't want to just be another ripoff of, doing that record again. We wanted to be somewhat modern, somewhat current, take it to the next level, really.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's 40 years from the debut. So you have to kind of, you're a different person. You're a different songwriter now. So it's got to be that way.
You think, but there are people that, oh, it's too different, or it's too modern, or it's too this, or it's too that. It's almost harder to do it 40 years later than it is to do it when you're first doing it.
Yeah.
You can kind of follow your instincts, but then now you're thinking, close to this, is this too far away? The song, one of our favorite songs on the record is Try to Let Go, which is, it's kind of almost goth or something like that. It's not old Touch. And it's just getting great response now. It's probably more modern than some of the other stuff. But that was a song where, once you start second guessing yourself, would I dig it, or is it this, or is it that? That's when you kind of get fucked up. So you just got to have fun. You have to go with your instincts, and you just got to, but by the end of it, I would say we decided that whatever we do is Touch.
Yeah.
That's what it is. We can't second guess it. Is this too much this? Is this too much that? It's like, that's what we're doing, and it's what we do. And I think just the fact that the four of us are playing it and singing it is what defines it. That was our hope. And Craig wrote Scream at the Sky, which is at first blush not very Touch, but it's almost like Pink Floyd. But once we did it, it became us in a way. Another thing that we're just going to do it the best we can. Doug's song Tripping Over Shadows is kind of a mid-range singly almost. We just did it as best we could, with tons of harmonies, and we just kind of brought our A game. We try to bring our A game to it. So no matter what it was, we just did our best, out of respect for whoever wrote it, out of respect for each other.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, because you mentioned a couple songs that I was actually going to bring up. The song "Try to Let Go," "Fire and Ice," "Tripping Over Shadows," and "Frozen Ground." I think right in the middle of the album there. I think the album really hit its stride, and those 4 songs in a row, I love those songs. I think "Frozen Ground" was a song that you wrote, and you mentioned, everybody else kind of contributed, and I know the other songs that other guys in the band wrote. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those songs?
Yeah, well, Craig came up with Fire and Ice. He's really great at coming up with rock stuff and riffs and stuff. And then it was almost a little AC/DC-ish in a way, something like that.
Yeah.
But then we did it, and we brought ourselves to it, and we, brought our harmonies to the chorus. I pretty much arranged and produced it, and as I did with, Tripping Over Shadows, Doug played it on piano, and it's a piano voice song. It's like, Doug, man, it's not. It's, let's put some drums on it or something. And we built it up and turned it into what it was. But we slowly, arranged it. But as it evolved, they just became us.
Yeah.
And we just put forward on it. Yeah.
Now, before we kind of go on to some other stuff, I did want to ask you about the new Touch album, Tomorrow Never Comes, did come out in America on Deco Entertainment, right?
Right.
Tom and I actually did an interview on our podcast a couple months back with Charlie Kalf, and of course, he's a guy's an old friend of mine. So I know how was dealing with Deco, and how did that all come about?
Deco's amazing. Charlie's, Charlie played on. He played on a couple of American Tears things,
mm-hmm.
and I have another band coming out in a month called Keys, which is a keyboard-oriented band with a great Swedish singer from the band Syra. I don't know if you've ever heard of Syra, Jake E.
Okay. No.
So Charlie played some songs, some keyboards on that. I try to include him. Whenever I'm doing any keyboard stuff, I always ask if he wants to make a cameo appearance. You know, he played on some American Tears stuff. So yeah, Charlie's great. We were on Escape, for 2 American Tears records, and Escape was distributed by Decco. And I met Charlie, and I said, "Hell, let's just go in the U.S. with Decco." And of course, touches on Escape in Europe because Escape's very strong in Europe, but maybe not as strong in the U.S. Because they're a European label. So then we just decided Charlie wanted it, and we went in that direction. So they're wonderful to work with, very nice people. I've never seen him lose his temper. He's always got a calm and respect, and he, besides being a musician, he's a great musician, but also he really, I think, not only us, but has respect for the bands that he signed and gives them their space and does the best he can to promote. So,
yeah, great. That's cool. Yeah. So I know Tom wanted to ask you a little about and go on to the Drive She Said stuff. So let's kind of go in that direction now.
Before we get to Drive She Said, I wanted to ask you one question I probably have always wanted to ask you. I think with all the years that have passed, you're kind of regarded as one of the godfathers of AOR, which has become a term that's, very broad-based, overused. And I would like to ask you, back in the day, did you get your ideas from bands like Journey, Foreigner, or Boston, or was it more something like you did on your... Because I've always looked at AOR as really not being necessarily out of those bands while most people think they are. I look at Touch, Shooting Star, Early Asia, GTR. To me, that was the beginnings of AOR. So where did you get that sound from that has carried on for so many years?
Well, it wasn't from those bands. I mean, as I was saying earlier, we were, in all those bands, we're trying to find a signature sound. I'm not even sure the commonality between a Journey and a Boston and a Foreigner, or it's
right. I never did either. That's why I didn't. Right.
Or Styx or Kansas. Everybody was just trying to do their thing, and we had certain instruments that we could do it with. Early stages, I mean, we were dealing with an ARP Odyssey, which is a monophonic instrument, a Mini Moog, which is a monophonic instrument. When the ARP strings came out, Gary Wright had a huge hit with Dreamweaver. I mean, that instrument hadn't been invented. So we were, especially keyboards, we were very at the mercy of technology and what was being invented. Of course, the Hammond organ was there, and that gave, a lot of bands were doing that. But every new thing that was invented, we, jump on it and try to use it, and that would kind of become our sound. So but it really was more of looking within, looking inside, expressing your personal taste. I'm always trying to go for beauty in a way. I'm looking for something that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Either nasty or kick-ass, some kick-ass guitar riff, but also with all the harmonies and the keyboard tapestries. I just want to make the hairs on your arm go up, or mine. Maybe it's selfish, but if I'm getting my adrenaline going, and can listen to it
right
5 years later.
I totally get that.
I mean, that's really the goal, is to get the hairs to stand up. We were in that world of that instrumentation, but I wasn't at all, in fact, kind of, it's funny. We used to rehearse in a loft in New York. I don't know if you ever noticed the similarity between Last Chance for Love and Feels Like the First Time. But, we actually we would rehearse, and our roadie was Foreigner's roadie.
Ah,
really?
Okay.
I always was like, hey, man, that sounds like Last Chance for Love. So, who knows, where stuff was coming from or what you stumble over. But we were really, especially when we were in the studio, we were just searching for our own thing.
And who knew you would have became the godfather of AOR?
Well, you say so.
I say so.
But you're from Brooklyn. Oh, it's got to be the fucking Godfather.
That's right. That's right.
I say so. So what I wanted to ask you now is how did you hook up with one of my favorite musicians and singers of all time, Al Frisch? How did that partnership come about?
Wow, Al. Yeah, I just got to chill. Well, after Touch, it was clear we weren't going to continue the Touch. And it's weird. All these years later, I look at bands like Rainbow, who had 20 lead singers, and all these other bands that just, have musical chairs in terms of the musicians. But Craig, didn't want to do it, wasn't going to do it anymore. He was kind of changing his life. And Bruce was like, oh, get on a singer. Let's continue. We keep going. It's like, it didn't even occur to me that was even a remote possibility. First of all, I could probably never, find somebody like Craig, but, that was Touch. Touch is kind of over unless we get back together and could do another record. It was, I don't know if that was a mistake or it just, anyway, it was what happened. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I was working with, I don't know if you know Fran Cosmo.
From Boston.
Sure.
Yeah, this was before Boston. We were working for probably 6 to 8 months on some stuff. And then it wasn't quite working out in terms of the songwriting with Fran, though we're very, very good friends. And then I found Al. I think I put an ad in somewhere. And Al shows up with a couple of his great Long Island friends who become like brothers as well. And it was like, holy shit. There was the voice. So rather than forming a band and dealing with all those assholes and bullshit and your drummer's going to quit and your bass player's, on the rag or whatever. Oh, excuse me.
It's anything goes here.
Yeah, no, we're fine.
Yeah. So Al and I just kind of decided to be a duo. I mean, we had a band that we stayed with for years and we toured with, but the essence of the band, I guess like a rock version of Hall & Oates or Tears for Fears or whatever it may be, we just kind of kept it as a duo so we could musically make the decisions. Because, I mean, our taste was so similar. I mean, we never had a bad word. All the years I knew him, there was never a bad word with Al. We just were on the same page. We're great friends. There was never a disagreement. Some people have said, oh, you need tension to make music. Say, fuck you. No, we were fine. So, yeah, that's how I met Al. He came up to my apartment where I also had a little recording studio on 72nd Street. And then we started building it and we started doing demos. And some of our earlier demos were a bit more electronic. We started really getting into the rock stuff, and we signed with a manager named John Luongo, who was one of the bigger mixers at the time. And John brought us up to CBS, and CBS, by the grace of God, signed us. And we got to do our records.
Where did the name Drive She Said come from?
Yeah, we were going to call the band Drive. And then I have a friend named Mark Kahan, who's unfortunately passed away, a major videographer. I mean, he did, the early Bon Jovi stuff. He just did many, many rock videos. Scandal, ton of country stuff. I think he might have even done a Springsteen thing, whatever. And he said, no, it's boring. Why don't you go Drive, she said. I said, okay, Martin, thanks. So we called it Drive, said, which I think was more picturesque, maybe conducive to your imagination a little bit more. So we went with Drive, she said.
Plus, there were a couple of bands out there in and around that time that were called Driver throughout the state. So, sure.
I think after that there was a band called Drive, but I think beat them to the punch. But anyway, then we launched into having steering wheels on every album cover.
Became the signature look.
So, when you met Al Frisch, did you know at that time that you had a diamond in the rough?
Yeah, and I think he did too. I mean. And he wasn't so rough, by the way. But I get your expression.
Yeah, in terms of like nobody knew who he was, not his.
He played every instrument, and we just were on the same page musically. And he sometimes I would start a song and I just wouldn't finish it, knowing that he knew exactly where to go with it. It's like, okay, what would you do here? And he just, okay, that's it. It was such a pleasure to work with him, and a phenomenal musician, phenomenal voice.
Oh yeah, his voice was just, and a great guitar player too. I remember the first time I saw videos of him playing lead guitar. I had no idea he could play like that. I knew how he could sing. I didn't know he was that type of guitar player.
I mean, he's a better keyboard player than me, by far. He's like Rachmaninoff or something.
No, the guy was just such a super talent, a huge favorite of mine. Now, this album
So,
kind of puts you guys. I remember when it came out. I bought it when it came out. It had some immediacy to it in terms of everybody that I knew at the time that was into the whole, AOR melodic rock movement glommed onto this record, just from its inception. Did you guys know that? I mean, did you anticipate that being on CBS, or was it kind of a shock?
we wanted to get the record out. So CBS is a great label. I had been on there on Columbia for years with American Tears, so it was pretty amazing that I was back on CBS. That was like really unbelievable. But I don't know. As a musician, you're a beggar. You're begging people to like your shit.
Right.
You go with your hat in your hand, especially in those days when you had to get some executive at some major company to like you. It wasn't like now. There was no Spotify or anything like that. So you could be a great band and you could not get signed. And that happened to many, many bands, as you know, or getting signed, getting turned down by 11 companies and getting lucky. And then the public responding, and then the record company taking the credit for it. Oh, we knew. No, you didn't, you asshole. So we got lucky and we got signed and we got it out. Right after that, grunge came, as you remember. Nirvana came out and Pearl Jam and all that stuff, and the music industry changed. And we ran over to Europe and got signed in Europe, but the melodic rock was really kind of dead for many, many years in the States. It was a brutal transition for many bands.
So you moved on to Music from Nations on the second album, Driving Wheel.
Yeah. We toured Europe, like every nook and cranny of Europe, especially the UK. We toured with, clubs, and it was so much fun. We were actually a day before or a day after Pearl Jam, or Guar, by the way. So that was a lot of fun. We'd show up at a club, there'd be, fake blood all over the place. or who the fuck is this band, Pearl Jam? And then of course they completely changed, and Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots, blah blah blah, Soundgarden. They really just changed everything, and a lot of bands just like I said, had to kind of figure out how to reinvent themselves or find a way to survive.
Well, this album did do well at the time. I remember I was writing for a magazine called Boulevard at the time, and it got a big buzz in terms of the circle of people that was still fans of this music. I'm not going to, it wasn't a worldwide phenomenon, but the people
and in Europe, it was like number one. There was I don't know if you knew Kel Hellraiser.
I knew him very well. Yeah, Mark knows him as well. Yeah.
Kel. So Kel was one of the moving people at Shay's record shop, which was really a center for melodic rock, towards getting Drive. She said, we were on number one on a couple charts out there. And it really took off in Europe, which really facilitated the Music for Nations thing. That was the first record. So then Music for Nations allowed us to do more records. But yeah, it really was, Europe was the place that we were surviving at. So it wasn't so much in the States, really.
And unfortunately for you guys, with the timing of everything, you were growing as a band. Like that first record, while it was on CBS, and I liked it a lot, I liked the second one a lot more. I saw the difference in the band just from one album to another. Even though it was on a smaller label, I definitely thought it was even better than the first one.
Thank you. That's because we were touring. And we were touring with UFO, by the way, or FM or some, heavier bands. So we needed to kick some ass. So we needed some songs like Driving Wheel and, some of the heavier things that would, allow us to survive a bit more in a rock lot. I mean, you can't be playing for UFO and do When the Spirit Moves You.
Right.
Or, Love Is No Pride was one of our big singles. So we actually, when we did Love Is No Pride, for instance, I just played piano and sat with Al on the side of the stage, and he sang it. So we turned into a piano voice song. Of course, you didn't want to get away with a whole poppy, number when you have people spitting blood, for
right. No, I get it.
Yeah, so that
it was a heavier record than the first one overall, not in its entirety, but
no, not its entirety.
In my opinion, the best song on the album was "Veil of Tears." That was my favorite song.
That's probably the most Pearl Jammy song there is that, on the record in a way.
Right.
That was, I would say grunge, not Pearl Jam, but that was heavy and dark, and I love Daily of Tears.
It was a terrific record. It was, in my opinion, it was a jump up from the first one, which was very, AOR from beginning to end. Driving Wheel had hard rock. It had some dark stuff. It had some typical AOR. It was more diverse. It was a band, and in my opinion, that was growing.
Well, thank you.
And then we moved to the next one, which is Accelerator.
That was very eclectic. I'm on, at this moment, I'm forgetting what songs were on the record, if there was on Driving Wheel but yeah.
What I wanted to hit you with on this album, and hopefully you could remember it to see if I'm out of my mind or I'm spot on. This album always reminded me, in spots, not the whole record, of the first Bruce Hornsby. Am I on point with that?
And there was some, almost Bruce Springsteen, a lot of lyrical, almost Bob Dylan-y, long piano things.
Right.
Yeah, Hornsby was quite big at the time, and Mark Cohen. Yeah, so we did some piano stuff. We rocked out too, but yeah, it was definitely an eclectic record. That was, I think, I don't know, we just wanted to do that and kind of spread out and do some different kind of stuff. So we did.
And you really, put forth Al's vocals on this album. I think that at this point, everybody really knew what a great singer this guy was.
For sure. And, Something at Last, there were some political songs, 42nd Street, very lyrical songs.
So then we move on to Real Life. What could you tell us about that? Because that's your first album now on Frontiers Records.
Well, Real Life just came out on Escape, again, about 2 years ago. I was not happy with Real Life the way it turned out on Frontiers, and we remixed the whole thing. And Khalil at Escape re-released it. It just sounds so much better than that. It might be my favorite Drive She Said record, actually.
I didn't know Khalil re-released this album.
Yes. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes over there. But it is, I get chills when I listen to this version of it, because it's a little bit closer to the first record, but it's anthemic choruses, scathing guitar solos, really cool musicianship, a lot of symphonic stuff. We did a song called, I think Overdrive was on that song.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, another kind of Driving Wheel. We do one of those for every record. We just like to kick ass.
So what did Khalil do? What he remixed? It was remixed?
I remixed it with, I forget his name, Brian. He's from New Jersey. And it's like night and day now. I'm really proud of that record. Yeah.
I have to hunt that out. I never knew that. I know Khalil from the early 90s. I went to England in the late 90s and visited him. And we still keep in contact. But it's for some reason, it got past me that he re-released this. I did not know that.
The choruses on this record, they're just so freaking huge, and the voices, and loaded up tons of harmonies. Yeah, I really did. I really dig the.
Because I didn't like the original production on this on Frontiers.
It was terrible. That's we were very disappointed.
It had no bottom end to it. It was very like a very high end tinny production.
It was it wasn't right, and that was something. I don't want to badmouth anybody, but it was something.
No. I'm just talking. I'm talking as a fan. You don't have you don't have to agree with me.
Check out the Escape version. I can get that to you. I'll even send you MP3s or if you want to hear it. I did all new artwork, remixed the entire thing.
Interesting, because this was the least favorite of the Drive She Said albums to me. It didn't resonate with me, and I never liked the production on it. And I'm wondering, if I heard
it's probably one of my favorites, or my favorite Drive She Said. So check it out.
Well, we're going to move to my favorite, which unfortunately was the last album, Pedal to the Metal. It was my favorite album by the band. It had a heaviness. It had just songs that the first time I heard this CD when I bought it, like the first 6-7 songs out of the box, I absolutely loved. On first listen. How did this come about years after the fact, and how did you come up with so many great songs at this point in time?
Yeah, by that time, Al and I knew really what we were doing, and what this band was. Pedal to the Metal was actually one of the songs that it didn't end up on Driving Wheel or whatever was around that time, but we wrote it for that. That was our set opener when we were touring. It was only about 2 minutes. It was just an intro, Pedal to the Metal, and we morphed into the second song. So we finished it, and then we recorded it as it should have been recorded. Yeah, I love In Our Blood.
In Our Blood is it's the best song on the album, and there's so many great songs on the album, but that's my favorite.
Yeah, and we knew how to do them, and we just picked the best of the best of that we did or that we were coming up with, and we put it on the record. And I went over to, well, the thing about these records is they're done, in your living room, and then you have to send whoever for a guitar overdone. So it's very difficult to kind of do it and make it happen. But we did, and I had met some great Swedish musicians who played drums perfectly. They start off with MIDI. You kind of write your own drum track, and then you ask somebody to play it, pretty damn close to the program, and they, do it and make it better with live drums. So Peter Ertgen is one of the drummers, and Pontus Engborg, who actually was in the Touch tribute thing at Firefest. They played drums on it, and Tommy Denander made a guest appearance, and blah, blah, blah. So, and I went to Europe to mix it with a person that Frontier set me up with, and we mixed it together. It probably could have been mixed a little bit better, but it is what it is. It's cool. I think we got the point across.
It definitely did. It had I like the fact that it had hard rock elements through the whole album. And once I connect with musicians, I like being going down different roads. And that would, you guys have done that from the AOR to rock. And even on this album, it was real punchy hard rock on some of the best songs with a big hard rock production. And when you have a single like Frisch,
a lot of harmonies, and yet we like to be eclectic,
Right.
I mean, Alan, we're not always trying to, push the envelope, and it was like, we do what the fuck we want to do. That's what he used.
No, that's what I liked about the band always. If you got the talent, I like going down different roads. I don't like hearing 6 records of the same exact thing. And you guys have been were pretty diversified throughout the whole Drive She Said period. I thought.
Yeah, we really wanted to be eclectic, which is another nice thing about being a duo as well. You can kind of, in a way, get away with that a little bit easier as well, rather than being a band and having to deal with the same inputted musicians all the time.
Right.
And very often Al would play almost everything on his, like he played bass and guitar. I would generally do the keyboards, but if he could do it better, he would do the keyboards too. So, it's every man, it's like everybody had input.
I mean, unfortunately, Al passed not too long after this album. And how did you find yourself going forward without him in your whole coexistence of being a musician?
Well, I miss Al every fucking day.
I can imagine.
I mean, right now, every day, I just want to talk to him. I want to play him a song. What do you think of this? What should we do here? Sometimes I try to almost channel him. It's like at 54, to die of a heart attack is just ripped from us all. God knows what he would have done musically, and as a person, that's a whole nother thing. He's an amazing being. He wasn't all that I did in music. I mean, so, I did other things. I was in various other bands. I was in Sweden for a year and a half doing doing pop music. So it didn't necessarily stop me in my tracks from being creative, though I miss being creative with him, in that kind of way. I found, I guess, things to do. I actually had a couple of hits in Asia with some pop stuff, K-pop, if you can believe it. And I don't talk about that much. And then just picked myself up, and we did 3 American Tears records. I just wanted to play. I wanted to, express. So I did hardcore, White Flags, and then followed by Angels Hello.
Free Angel Express.
Yeah. So I really got a chance to revisit the 70s and 80s and just play. just play keyboards and be creative, and 8-minute songs and no sound, no structure. You don't have to go to chorus if you don't want to. You don't have to do a B section. Just what do you want to hear here? You're on a precipice, and in a really purely creative sense, based on instinct and experience and whatever sounds are available in the huge whatever choice of sounds that you can choose from as a keyboard player now, from symphonic stuff to elephant screams.
Right.
So I really immersed myself in that. It was a bit of COVID going on, so I was basically alone, with my wife in our apartment in Sweden, and I have my studio there. So I just was, without any hope of anybody liking it or wondering if they even wanted to hear it, I just was creative as hell and just did these records. So yeah, I really immersed myself in that just to keep going. And then after that, morphed into Touch. The guys came together, and we started working on Touch.
Yeah, kind of came full circle there for 40 years in between, right?
What's amazing is Al's microphone, a Neumann 103. His wife gave it back to me. Steph gave it back to me, and I sent it over to Craig. So all the vocals on the Touch stuff that Craig is singing are on Al's mic.
Oh, wow.
So holy shit, And I don't know if you listen very carefully to Try to Let Go, you will hear Al's voice on the background.
Oh, really?
In that song. Nobody knows this except me who mixed it. But you know now.
Wow.
And I guess watches the podcast with him. But he's in there because we had done that song as well. So I grabbed some of Al's vocals. So Al has made an anonymous appearance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the other things. Obviously you are a longtime songwriter. It's the craft that you have. I want to ask you about this actually before we touch on anything else. Let's go to the Michael Bolton time that you had in your period of your life. You played on the first couple Michael Bolton albums.
Yeah.
And you also are a co-writer with him on the famous I Found Someone, right?
Yes, yeah. We wrote that about the same time as all the other stuff was happening.
And that was originally a Laura Branigan song, right? And then Cher, of course, kind of made it a little more famous.
Thank God Cher did it. Yeah. Well, you reminded me in that interim after Touch, when I was working with Fran, I guess even a bit before Fran or during, I got a call from a wonderful guy named Louis Levin, who's managed Michael. Touch was really kind of at its high point, and Michael was just getting signed to CBS. And, Michael's from Connecticut, and Louis suggested we write together. So we got together, and we wrote Fool's Game. That was like the first song we wrote.
Wow.
That kind of solidified his deal with Columbia. And the other thing that was amazing that was happening in New York, and you were around as well, the China Club and Nirvana. The hang at the China Club was amazing in New York City during those years. Everybody was there. Every Thursday night, Nirvana there's a club called Nirvana, and they would have an open mic. Michael was there. You could see Mick Jagger there. David Bowie would be there. Springsteen would be there. Everybody. You'd see Danger hanging out. Bon Jovi was hanging out. That's how I met Aldo Nova at China Club, and we started writing a lot. I hung out with Michael there. So you could meet somebody in this given evening and have a career for the next 10 years after that.
Wow. Yeah, those famous, I remember those famous jam sessions at the China Club.
Yeah, who knows who would come up at the China Club. And it was just across town from me, and it just doesn't exist anymore. It's such a shame that it doesn't exist. Maybe it exists online or something, but it was such a vibrant time in New York, and so many bands were getting signed out of New York, and so much was happening. And, it was basically LA and New York. Some guys went to LA, like a guy working with now, James Christian, who's, from House of Lords. We was actually talking about this the other day. He was like, man, you're from Connecticut. You weren't in the New York scene so much. He says, no, I went to LA. And that's when House of Lords got signed. So, James chose to go another route. But it was a pretty amazing place. And then after the first record with Fool's Game, I actually did some touring with Michael. And then we wrote 3 songs on his next record, Everybody's Crazy, which are some of my favorite songs I've ever written. Can't Turn It Off to me is like, I don't think it ever gets better than that in terms of, I don't know, I guess you can call it AOR, and we weren't trying to write AOR, we were just writing what we were writing. But the pain in that song, and at that moment in my life, I was going through some periods of difficulty. But musically, that song just has it all, so much emotion in that. And thank goodness Neil Kernan, who produced it, and Michael really gave it the attention that, I think it deserved. So.
Well, let's jump around a little bit on some other things. I know Tom was asking about something, or we were talking about it earlier before we came on. The Mystic Healer release. What can you tell us about that? That, of course, had a lot of. It came out in the late '90s, but I'm assuming this was something that was a lot older than that.
And where did you find Todd Googings, and whatever happened to him?
Yeah, Mario, and at the label, and Magnus asked me, do you have any older songs like that never got recorded, any even Michael Bolton songs or whatever? I said, yeah, we got a lot of them. And Todd was a very good friend, a great singer. So we put together the Mystic Healer record, which is basically a lot of those older songs. Water from a Stone I wrote for Cher, which she never did, but I really thought she should have. It was just, it was written for her. And Tona Nurum, John Nurum from Europe's sister,
right,
a great singer. She did a song called "If You Ever Fall," which was a hit in Europe, and so we did that. We did a whole bunch more things. Actually, we did Tonight, which I wrote with Michael, which never ended up in any of Michael's records. So a lot of them were older songs that we just put in one place, and I think Todd did an amazing job of singing them.
He was tremendous on that record. How come he hasn't ever shown up on any other records? At least
I don't know. He's a great singer, and he was singing for a living for a while. But I guess no one discovered him, or no one asked him, or something.
Yeah, it's a shame. He was really good. I love that Mystic Healer record, and I thought he really stood out vocally on it. I thought he was tremendous.
Yeah, huge range, huge power.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a lot of fun doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that album's a big favorite of mine.
Cool.
In fact, I own the Japanese press that had the extra song "All Your Love" on it that wasn't on the European press.
Yeah, I love that song.
That was I actually thought that Japanese bonus track was even better than some of the songs on the album.
Yeah, I think I wrote that with Randy Jackson, didn't I? Oh,
interesting.
If I remember, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I wrote that with Randy. That's a great freaking chorus.
Yeah, great song.
Yeah, but come out in Japan, they require you to have a bonus track. So that's what it turned out to be. And it's got to be a good one. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's changed all now. And I don't know whether you're up on it, but nobody does it. You know what? They give Japanese labeled acoustic tracks, alternative mixes. They don't give an actual studio bonus track anymore. It's very, very rare. They give like these cheeseball, acoustic versions and stuff like that now as Japanese bonus tracks.
Yeah, we just, released the first 2 Touch records in Japan on a label called Rubicon, and they were not having that. They wanted something that was credible, that would sell some. So we found some stuff. I forget what we found, but so we tried not to do throwaway stuff. Though it's tempting, I guess, but you also got to put, you want to be proud of what you're putting out there. You don't want to put bullshit out there.
Exactly.
Well, you mentioned a second ago the name Randy Jackson, of course, of Zebra. We just did a podcast with Randy a few weeks ago, and we talked about it, and we're going to talk about it with you here too. Talk about the Sign project.
Oh, I love the Sign. Yeah, it's funny. I just was listening to "I'm Alive," a song on the first Sign record. That's another record that we remastered a couple of years ago, and which is out on Escape. And it's night and day from the stuff that was out in Frontiers. Again, I hate to say it. That's something that bothered me for years. Like, before I die, I got to get that Sign shit out there. It's so good. It's got to be redone properly, and it's got to be remastered. And we did that we remixed the second one because the second one was very badly mixed by somebody that the label chose. In fact, they were leaving out guitar solos. They didn't use, I mean, it was a fiasco. I won't mention the name of the guy who did it. And we couldn't stop it. And, we had a big fight with them. And we actually put out our version mixed by Randy, kind of in competition just to save face. But finally, I got Khalil again from Escape interested in it. And so let's just do this right. And we remastered it and remixed. We remixed the second one and remastered it. And we just remastered the first one. And it just sounds so kick-ass and really the way it's supposed to sound now and it came out as a double CD on Escape. And I swear I'm not trying to sell this stuff. I just, in terms of putting music out there that you want to be proud of, that's, if you want to listen to The Sign, that's the one you want to hear. Serafino did give us a lot of freedom. The guy who runs Frontiers, he kind of, said, why don't you do a band with these guys and put this together? And it was a super group, and Randy and Terry came over to my house, and we wrote these, crazy songs, and we wrote them very quickly. We must have written the whole album in like 2 weeks at my place. But then it took about a year and a half to record it because, writing the shit's easy, but making it, recording it and finding a place to record within a non-budget is very difficult. And then recording, 60 tracks of background vocals and, these tapestries of sound was very time consuming. So it took us a while to do it. And Billy Greer was where he was, and Bobby Rontinelli, when we had to wait for him, to get off tour to play the drums, which was very, very challenging drum parts. So we slowly put it all together in Randy's basement in Long Island, pretty much, and in my studio in New York. And then we proceeded to mix it, and thank God for Serafino for allowing it all to happen and being patient. So that was a good thing. I do thank him for that.
The other record I wanted to talk to you about a little bit was Flesh and Blood with Al Pitrelli and Danny Vaughan. If you could tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I'm a Hammond organ guy. I mean, when it comes down to it, I grew up on Long Island. I lived about 15 minutes away from the place called the Action House, which is where Vanilla Foot started. It's where the Rascals started. It's where Soul Mandela started. Everybody was, especially with the Hammond organ, the Illusion. I don't know if you know those bands. Well, the Rascals and the Vanilla Foot.
Sure.
But they were, and the Vagrants, of course, they were living there. I could go down there any night and hear the Vagrants, or pretty much the Rascals, and Vanilla Fudge was there all the time.
Leslie West was in the Vagrants?
He was the Vagrants. Yeah, they actually did. I think the first hit on Atlantic was Respect, the same label as the Rascals. So it was Hammond organ mania and bluesy mania. So that's where Flesh and Blood. I just wanted to play the Hammond and, really kind of go back to roots and do some bluesy, funky stuff. So, of course, Al was into it, Al Pitrelli and Danny Vaughan. We had two other singers, but it never quite happened. The record was done, and then at the last minute, they asked Danny to do it, and Danny just came in and sang the shit out of it. So yeah, that's a story.
So it was your John Lord moment.
I don't know, John Lord or Sly Stone,
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. John Lord, after all these years, has a proprietary claim on a grindy Hammond organ, but there are plenty of other people doing it. During that time, he was maybe, stood the test of time and lasted a long time, but everybody was playing Hammond in those days.
Yes. I'm old enough to remember that. Yeah, absolutely.
You remember the Nice? You remember one of my favorite bands was Crazy Arthur Brown. That was, Fire was like, that really started it all in a way. Or Hush by Deep Purple. That was really where that was all coming from.
Ken Hensley and early Uriah Heep.
I wasn't so into Uriah Heep, but yeah, all those bands, Nazareth, and all that stuff. But Long Island was the major place where that stuff was happening. Oceanside, yeah. Action House was in Oceanside. My God, my brain is working. Jesus.
I came into the Long Island scene, growing up in Brooklyn, I came into the Long Island scene more like in the latest 70s, in the Rum Bottoms, Hammerhead era.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's where I saw Zebra. Actually, I was telling Jackson when we interviewed them, I saw Zebra, probably 4 or 5 years before they were signed, when they were doing just strictly Led Zeppelin shows, and you couldn't get in the club to see them. That's how.
A couple of years before that was the Action House. Yeah, it was Billy Joel used to play the Action House and all over. But I think he was in a band called Attila, talking about grindy Hammond organ.
Oh my God.
Right.
Have you heard of Attila?
I heard it.
Yes.
I can't say I'm a fan of it, but
Right.
I have definitely heard it.
John Small, who's a major manager now, was the drummer. And it was just a duo. And of course, Lee Michaels and all that stuff. So it was a great time to come up. But Flesh and Blood were funky. And by the way, speaking of which, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I got a call from a label in France called Bad Reputation, who wanted to reissue Flesh and Blood. So that is out now again in Europe on a label called Bad Reputation.
Oh, okay.
And we did actually remaster it. And Danny and I wrote a new song called Keep On Rollin' for the record. So we did a new song for it. Talk about bonus tracks. We did too. Oh, that's right. And Danny did an acoustic version of a bluesy song called Riverside on the record, which kills. I mean, he just did a harmonica with acoustic guitar version. Very Howlin' Wolf or Muddy Waters,
Really?
early.
Wow.
Johnson, what's his name?
Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson, very, acoustic-y. And Danny just put that together in like 2 days. So, it's a cool record and it is available.
Well, Mark, we talked about a bunch of stuff. We covered a lot of things tonight. What are you currently up to? I mean, I know you mentioned that American Tears is kind of active again. You've been doing some albums the last few years. Of course, Touch has the Tomorrow Never Comes, came out last year. What's currently going on with you?
Well, actually next month, there's a band called Keys that I put together with Jakey, who's, again, a great singer. A band called Sierra. I don't know if you've ever heard of Amaranth, but phenomenal. He won Best Vocalist of the Year in 2020 in Burn magazines, a lot of major publications.
Okay.
So he actually recorded the vocals for his Sierra record at my place in New York. I got a call from a Swedish friend and said, I got a band, who's in New York to record, and they hate the video. Can they come over to your place to record? I said, sure. They were over in 45 minutes, 5 guys. And I was out the door flying to Sweden to go back to work. So they stayed at my house for a month and recorded. Anyway, I became great friends with Jake, and we wrote a song for the Sierra record. And then I was wanting to do this idea I had with 3 keyboard players, a drummer and a singer, because you can now really do anything with keyboard players. So it's 3 huge stacks of Hammonds and every keyboard you could possibly imagine, 3 players. So that was the thinking behind Keys. And Charlie got involved, and I got some other people involved. Almost worked with Don Airy, but didn't quite work out. Try to work with Rick Wakeman, try to work with Adam Wakeman. Didn't quite work out. They were busy. But by the end of the day, we finished the record, and it's really, I don't even know how to describe it. It's very signature goth times, very aggressive sometimes, very melodic sometimes, but it's all keyboards.
And that'll be out on Deco?
That will be out on Cargo Record. And in the States, it's AFM, is it called? What's the name of it? That huge distributor in the States. But basically, it's Cargo. And that's coming out. It's all, actually, I should be getting test pressings, or I should say CDs, within a couple of days. Great artwork by Stan Decker. And we had a lot of fun doing it and working with Jake, who's got this amazing voice and 4-octave range and could sing anything, really.
Great.
Really
is there anywhere, do you have a website that people can keep up to date on things?
I don't have it really. I used to have a Mark Mangold website, but I just haven't had time to keep it up. No, I guess me on Facebook. Everything is through my Facebook page.
Okay.
All these bands are basically pages or their own pages, like Touch, and now Keys. We're just getting Keys going. But yeah, I hope people check it out because it's been getting a great response by the magazines. We have some reviews coming out, and again, it's different and it's keyboards, so it's not like generic where you're chasing this 80s generic AOR thing. You're just trying to come up with new things and being creative and not formulaic. So it's always a little, I don't want to say scary because, you just do the best you can. But it is an unknown what the response is going to be. So You just got to make it so you like it again, so that, again, if you get those arms and those hair on your arms to go up, you have to hope that people are going to dig it, and people are really responding. It's very refreshing, because if you're hearing what sounds like guitar, it's not a guitar, it's a keyboard sounding kind of like guitar. It could be a grindy Hammond organ sounding like guitar, or else it could be a guitar emulator. There's a lot of plugins now that a keyboard can really play some scathing guitar shit now. It really sounds like guitar. Really been a blessing for me, because I love guitar, and I have guitarish ideas, and playing on keyboard is a lot of fun. You get the hammer-ons, and you can really just do anything guitar can do. It's pretty cool.
Well, you know what, Mark? Tom and I really appreciate this conversation tonight. I had a good time going down, memory lane, talking about all the different projects you've done over the years.
I do have one thing to add before you end.
Sure, go ahead.
My friend Fiona Flanagan introduced me to
a Jersey girl.
Jersey girl. She introduced me to James Christian a couple of months ago, because she's James married to Robin Beck, and they're friends. So yeah, hey James, how you doing? You got any songs? I sent him a song. Yeah, that's cool. And I guess I've written 9-10 songs now with House of Lords, and played all the keyboards on the new House of Lords record.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
I guess I'm in House of Lords now.
There you go. Newest member.
Yeah.
Breaking news on the Jersey Guys podcast.
James is just such a pleasure to work with, and it's such a pleasure to write that kind of stuff. It's, you have to put on another hat. Again, it's epic, and he's on Frontiers, and they wanted it to be a bit more like the first House of Lords record. So it's really going back to the 80s, late 70s, where there's freedom and you can do whatever the hell you want. So there's a lot of that. I met Jimmy Bell, who's an amazing guitar player, who wrote a couple of songs with some Swedes. A song I wrote with Jake Eves on the record, who, I just mentioned, who's in keys, and Syra. So really meeting a lot of very nice people, and turning out into we're actually mixing it now. It's turning out into a really great record.
Any ideas when that's going to hit?
Well, I know Frontiers wants the masters within like 2 weeks, and we're going crazy trying to finish it. So we're trying not, we're not trying not to,
rush it.
sacrifice anything. So we're, hopefully within a couple of months it'll be out.
Nice. Well, that's something to look forward to for sure.
There's a lot of stuff happening. We got Keys happening. We have that happening. Touchy's coming out with 2 new videos. We have a video coming out next week, which is very lyrically current, with the whole Ukraine thing, called Run for Your Life, written 2 years ago. Sadly, it's fucking relevant as hell. And coming out with another video with Touch in about 2 months, called A Little Bit of Rock and Roll, which is probably our stupidest song on the record, which we just straight ahead rock and roll. So that's happening. So we're still keep releasing these singles with Touch. So it's a lot of fun.
Good stuff, Mark. Well, we appreciate it. Again, appreciate the conversation tonight. And Tom, anything to close out?
Thanks very much, Mark. It was very enlightening, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stay in touch, please.
Yes, definitely. Appreciate it. Everybody, Mark Mangold, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Bye-bye, Mark.
Bye.